Finn was late again. That was nothing new. His shift at the maintenance bay started at the 6th hour, and it was already 10 past. His boots were loud on the polished floor of the transit hub, his duffel bag hanging off one shoulder, a half-eaten protein bar in his other hand. The hub was packed, as it always was at this hour. Ships coming in from the outer belts. Traders moving cargo. Families dragging children and luggage toward departure gates. Everyone going somewhere, everyone in a hurry. Finn kept his head down and moved with the crowd. The creature hold was on the left side of the main corridor, behind a long wall of transparent panels. It was where travelers left animals during layovers, or where transit staff kept unclaimed creatures until someone came for them. Finn had walked past it every single day for 3 years. He had never once stopped. He almost did not stop today either. But something made him slow down. He was not sure what it was at first. The hold was full of creatures from a dozen different worlds. There was a large furred thing from the Bren system curled in the corner of its bay, sleeping. There were 2 bright feathered birds hanging upside down from a bar, chattering at each other. There was a slow, round creature from somewhere near the outer rim that barely moved and seemed completely unbothered by the noise around it. And then there was the one at the far end. Small. Low to the ground. Shaped something like a cat, though not quite. The fur was a pale gray, short and flat, and the ears were wider than a normal cat's ears, angled slightly forward. The eyes were large and a deep, quiet amber. She was sitting perfectly still in the middle of her bay, not pacing, not sleeping, not doing anything at all. Just sitting. Watching the people walk by. Finn slowed without meaning to. He had seen that bay before. For a while there had been a small notice on the glass, unclaimed, available for adoption, but the paper had yellowed at the corners now. It had been there a long time. He watched her for a moment. She did not react to the people passing. She did not press forward or make noise or do anything to get attention. She simply sat there with her amber eyes open, watching, as person after person walked by without looking at her. Finn started walking again. He made it about 4 steps. Then he heard it. It was not loud. It was not distressed. It was calm and flat and spoken in basic, so plain and clear that there was no mistaking it for anything else. No one wants me. Finn stopped. He turned around slowly. She was still sitting in the same spot. Her paw was pressed flat against the glass now, the small gray pads of her foot touching the panel in a way that looked almost deliberate. Her amber eyes were not looking at the crowd anymore. They were looking at him. Finn stood there in the middle of the corridor with people moving around him on both sides. Someone bumped his shoulder and kept walking without apologizing. The protein bar in his hand had gone cold. His bag felt heavy. He looked at the small creature on the other side of the glass. She looked back at him. She did not repeat herself. She did not need to. The words were already sitting somewhere in the middle of his chest, quiet and heavy, the way true things sometimes feel. Finn had heard a lot of creatures make sounds. He had heard mimics and signal callers and species that could reproduce human speech without understanding a word of it. He knew what that looked like. The mouth moved but the eyes were empty. Her eyes were not empty. She had said it the way someone says a thing they have been thinking for a long time. Not to make anyone feel guilty. Not to get attention. Just to say it out loud, because it was the truth, and the truth had gotten too heavy to carry alone in silence. Finn set down his bag. He did not think it through. He did not weigh it or consider it or make a list of reasons. He just set the bag down on the floor of the corridor and looked at the small creature behind the glass and thought, without quite meaning to, that she sounded exactly like someone who had been waiting a very long time for someone to simply stop. So he stopped. He picked up his bag again, turned away from the departure gates, and walked to the transit desk at the side of the hold. The staff member there, a young woman with a lanyard full of access cards, looked up with mild surprise. "Can I help you?" "The one at the end," Finn said. "The gray one." "How long has she been here?" The woman checked her screen. Something in her face shifted slightly. 22 days. Finn nodded slowly. "What do I need to fill out?" The woman blinked. "You want to, you're inquiring about adoption." "Yes." She looked at him for a moment, then back at her screen, then back at him. "She talks," she said carefully. "I mean, she actually talks. Not mimicry. She understands what she says." "I know," Finn said. "I heard her." There was a brief pause. Then the woman reached under the desk and pulled out a flat data pad with a form already half loaded on the screen. She held it out to him. "Fill in the top 3 sections," she said. "I'll get the rest started on my end." Finn took the pad and sat down on the bench against the wall. Through the transparent panel across from him, the small gray creature had not moved. She was still sitting in the same spot, her paw no longer on the glass, her amber eyes watching him quietly. He looked up at her once while he filled out the form. She looked back. Neither of them said anything. But something had already changed, in the small, simple way that things change when one person decides to stop walking and another one finally gets to stop waiting. The form was longer than Finn expected. There were sections about living space, work schedule, experience with non-human species, and something called a compatibility assessment that had 12 questions and no clear right answers. Finn filled it all out honestly. Small quarters. Long shifts. No prior experience with companion animals of any kind. He handed the datapad back to the woman at the desk and waited. She read through it slowly. Then she looked up at him with an expression that was not quite doubt but was close to it. "Your quarters are rated for single occupancy," she said. "I know. And your shift pattern is listed as irregular. Sometimes double shifts." "Yes." She looked back at the screen. "It says here you work maintenance on the lower decks. That is a loud environment." "It is," Finn said. There was a pause. The woman set the datapad down and folded her hands on the desk. "I want to be straightforward with you," she said. "She has been here 22 days. Before you, only one other person inquired. They left after she told them their collar choice was a symbol of ownership and she would not wear one." Finn almost smiled. "What did she say exactly?" "Word for word." The woman checked her notes. "She said, and I am reading directly here, you do not put a ring around the neck of someone who can tell you their own name." Finn was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded. "Fair point," he said. The woman studied him for a long moment. Then she picked up the datapad again, tapped through a few screens, and pressed her thumb to the bottom of the form. "Approved," she said simply. "Give me a few minutes to prepare the carrier." The carrier they brought out was second-hand. The latch on the front was slightly bent and the ventilation panel on the side had a small crack running through the corner. Finn did not complain. He signed the release form, accepted a thin packet of care instructions he suspected would not be very useful, and waited near the entrance to the hold while a junior staff member went in to collect her. There was a brief silence from inside the bay. Then a calm voice said, "I can walk." The junior staff member came back out with an expression like someone who had just been corrected by a piece of furniture. The small gray creature walked out behind him on her own, looked around the corridor once, and then looked at Finn. "You are the one from the glass," she said. "Yes," Finn said. She looked at the carrier. Then back at him. "Is that necessary?" "Probably not," Finn said. "But the staff seem more comfortable with it." She considered this for a moment, then walked into the carrier without further comment. Finn picked it up carefully, said a brief thank you to the desk staff, and headed for the exit. The lift to his residential floor was at the far end of the hub, past the food vendors and the currency exchange and a long row of lockers. Finn walked the whole way without stopping. The carrier was light. He could feel her shifting her weight slightly as they moved, adjusting to the motion, but she made no sound. The lift arrived with a soft chime. Finn stepped inside. The doors slid shut behind him. He pressed the button for floor 9. The lift began to move. 3 seconds passed. "Your jacket is torn," she said. "Left shoulder seam. About 4 centimeters." Finn glanced at his left shoulder. There was a clean split running along the seam, right where the fabric met the collar. He had not noticed it. He did not know how long it had been there. "You are right," he said. "Your boots do not match," she continued. "The left one has a worn heel. The right one does not. They are the same style but different ages. You put them on without looking." Finn looked down at his feet. She was completely correct. The left boot had a heel that had been grinding down for months. He kept meaning to replace it. The right boot was newer, bought last season after the old one split at the toe. "Also correct," he said. There was a brief pause. "Your face," she said, and her voice was the same, flat, calm, not unkind, just direct, "looks like someone who has not slept properly in a long time. Not one bad night. Many." The lift hummed around them. Finn looked straight ahead at the closed doors. "That one is also correct," he said quietly. She said nothing after that. The lift continued to rise. Floor 4. Floor 6. Floor 8. Finn expected her to say something else. Another observation. Another precise and slightly uncomfortable truth delivered in that calm, even voice. But she did not. She stayed quiet the rest of the way up, and Finn found, strangely, that the silence did not feel empty. It felt like the silence of someone who had already said what needed to be said and saw no reason to fill the rest of the space with noise. The doors opened on floor 9. Finn carried her down the corridor to his quarters, unlocked the door, and set the carrier down on the floor near the window. He unlatched the front panel and stepped back. She walked out slowly, looked around the room once, and took it all in. The small table with the tools on it. The shelf with the spare parts. The single chair. The narrow bed against the far wall. She did not say it was small. She did not say anything at all. She walked to the window, sat down in front of it, and looked out at the station lights below. Finn stood near the door and watched her. She had not said thank you. He had not expected her to. But she had not looked away from him since the moment he stopped walking in that corridor, and somehow, without either of them saying so, that felt like enough. Finn started calling her Nix on the 3rd day. He did not make an announcement about it. He did not ask if she approved. He simply said at once, quietly, while setting her food down near the window, "Here you go, Nix," and waited to see what happened. She looked at the bowl. Then at him. "That is what you are calling me," she said. "If that is all right," he said. She looked at the bowl again. "It is short," she said. "Efficient." She lowered her head and began to eat. Finn took that as a yes. Living with Nix was not difficult, exactly. It was just different from anything Finn had done before. She did not make a mess. She did not knock things over or scratch the furniture or make noise at odd hours. She slept near the window every night, curled into a neat shape, perfectly still. She ate what he put in front of her without complaint, as long as it was warm. She asked for nothing. But she noticed everything. She did not say it was small. She did not say anything at all. She walked to the window, sat down in front of it, and looked out at the station lights below. Finn stood near the door and watched her. She had not said thank you. He had not expected her to. But she had not looked away from him since the moment he stopped walking in that corridor, and somehow, without either of them saying so, that felt like enough. Finn started calling her Nix on the third day. He did not make an announcement about it. He did not ask if she approved. He simply said at once, quietly, while setting her food down near the window, "Here you go, Nix," and waited to see what happened. She looked at the bowl. Then at him. "That is what you are calling me," she said. "If that is all right," he said. She looked at the bowl again. "It is short," she said. "Efficient." She lowered her head and began to eat. Finn took that as a yes. Living with Nix was not difficult, exactly. It was just different from anything Finn had done before. She did not make a mess. She did not knock things over or scratch the furniture or make noise at odd hours. She slept near the window every night, curled into a neat shape, perfectly still. She ate what he put in front of her without complaint, as long as it was warm. She asked for nothing. But she noticed everything. If Finn left a tool in the wrong place, she would mention it. Not in an annoyed way. Just as a fact. "The calibration wrench is on the wrong shelf. You will look for it tomorrow." If he skipped a meal because the shift ran long, she would look at him when he came through the door and say, "You did not eat." Not a question. A statement. If he sat down too heavily in the chair at the end of a shift, she would watch him for a moment and then say, "That was a hard one." She was never wrong. Finn stopped trying to explain himself after the first week. There was no point. She had already seen whatever it was he was about to say. So he just answered her honestly, and she accepted his answers without pushing further, and that was how they talked. Short and direct and without anything extra in between. He found he did not mind it. What surprised him more was how much she paid attention to his work. He sometimes brought small components home to repair at the table, junction connectors, relay switches, pressure valves from the lower maintenance bays. He would sit with his tools and his light and work through the problem slowly, and Nix would sit on the other side of the table and watch him. He assumed at first that she was just passing time. Then one evening he was struggling with a small pressure coupling that kept reading false on the diagnostic tool, and without looking up from the table she said, "The secondary seal is installed backward. It looks correct from the outside but the thread direction is reversed." Finn looked up at her. Then he looked back at the coupling. He turned it over in his hands, examined the thread, and felt something drop into place in his understanding. She was right. The seal had been put in backward, probably at the manufacturing stage. It would pass a visual check every time and fail every pressure test and no one would be able to explain why. He fixed it in 4 minutes. He sat back and looked at her. "How did you know that?" "I watched you test it 6 times, she said. "The same result every time means the problem is not in the test. It is in the part. And the only part you did not examine from both sides was the seal." Finn was quiet for a moment. "You understood what I was doing." "I have been watching you work for 11 days, she said simply. "I understand the process." After that, Finn paid more attention to the way she watched him. And he began to notice something. It was not casual watching. It was the kind of watching that collects and organizes and builds a picture over time. She remembered every component he had touched, every fault he had described out loud while working, every solution he had found and every one he had not. She held all of it somewhere behind those quiet amber eyes and said nothing until the moment it became useful. The night the cooling array fault happened, Finn had been on shift for 9 hours already. The alert came through on his handheld just after the 11th hour. Fault detected in auxiliary cooling array, section 7, cause undetermined. He pulled on his jacket, grabbed his bag, and was halfway to the door when Nick stood up from the window. "I will come," she said. Finn started to say that the maintenance bay was loud and not a place for. She was already at the door. He let her come. The fault was bad. The cooling array for Section 7 controlled temperature regulation across 4 residential floors. If it failed completely, the environmental systems would begin to compensate by pulling load from the adjacent sections, and that chain could bring down half the station's climate grid within a few hours. Finn pulled up the diagnostic panel and started working through the system layer by layer. 20 minutes in, he was stuck. Every reading looked normal. Every relay showed green. But the temperature in Section 7 was still dropping, slow and steady, which meant something was wrong that the diagnostic could not see. He was staring at the panel with both hands on the frame when Nick spoke. "Relay 74 Charlie," she said. "It is showing green because the feedback loop is drawing from the backup sensor. The primary sensor failed. The relay is misaligned by about 3 degrees. Not enough to trigger the alarm. Enough to reduce flow." Finn turned and looked at her. She was sitting on a clean section of the floor, perfectly calm, looking at the panel the same way she looked at everything, steady, unhurried, completely certain. "How long have you known about 74 Charlie?" he asked. "Since you described the Section 7 maintenance log out loud last week," she said. "That relay was flagged as borderline in the previous inspection. You said someone would deal with it eventually." Finn turned back to the panel and found Relay 74 Charlie in 4 seconds. He opened the casing, adjusted the alignment, and reset the primary sensor. The temperature reading stabilized immediately. He stood there for a moment with his hands still on the panel. Then he looked back at Nyx. She had been paying attention this whole time. Not just to him. To everything he said, everything he worried about, everything he noticed and then set aside for later. She had held it all and said nothing until the exact moment it mattered. Finn picked up his bag and looked at her for a long moment. "Thank you," he said. Nyx stood up, shook out her fur once, and walked toward the exit. "You would have found it," she said. "I just saved you some time." It started with a question Finn did not mean to ask out loud. He was sitting at the table after a late shift, drinking something warm and looking at nothing in particular, when he said, "Where did you come from?" "Before the hub, I mean." He expected her to ignore it. Or to answer in the short, clipped way she answered most things, a fact or two, nothing extra. He was already reaching for his cup again when she spoke. "A place called the Vel Settlement on the 4th Transit Ring," she said. "My people do not have a planet. We move. We have always moved." Finn set his cup down. Nyx was at the window, as she usually was in the evenings. She did not turn around while she spoke. She looked out at the lights of the station, and her voice stayed calm and level, the way it always did. "We are called the Vel," she said. "There are not many of us. We travel in small groups, rarely more than 20. We have been on the transit rings for generations." "I have never heard of the Vel," Finn said honestly. "Most people have not," she said. "We do not seek attention." Finn was quiet for a moment. "What are your people like?" She was still for a moment before she answered. "Careful," she said. "Quiet. We observe before we speak. We value agreement. Smooth movement between members of the group. No disruption. No friction." She paused. "Those are the things that matter most to us. Keeping the group calm. Keeping everything in order." Finn watched her. Something in the way she described it felt careful. Like she was describing a place she had studied rather than a place she had lived. "That sounds like you," he said. "You are quiet. You observe." "I observe," she said. "I am not always quiet about what I see." There it was. Finn heard it in 3 words, the small, precise way she had of putting the true thing right in the middle of a sentence without warning. "Is that why you were left at the hub?" he asked. The silence that followed was longer than her usual pauses. Not uncomfortable. Just heavier. Yes, she said. She turned from the window then and walked to the table. She did not sit on the chair, she never did. But she stepped up onto the edge of the table and sat there, which was something she did when she was going to say more than usual. Finn did not move. He just waited. The Vel have something that other species do not, she said. We see patterns. Not just shapes or colors. Everything. Behavior. Systems. The way things connect. The way something that happened 3 weeks ago will cause a problem next Tuesday. We are born with it. It grows as we age. That is why you knew about the relay, Finn said. Yes. And why I knew about the seal. And why I knew you had not eaten before you came through the door. She looked at him steadily. I do not choose to notice these things. I simply notice them. I always have. That sounds useful, Finn said. To an engineer, perhaps, she said. To a Vel elder, it was not. She looked down at the table surface for a moment. When you see patterns, you also see when something is wrong. When someone is not telling the truth. When a decision will lead somewhere bad. Most beings do not want to hear these things. They want agreement. They want calm. She paused. I cannot give them that if the pattern says otherwise. You told them the truth, Finn said. Repeatedly, she said, and there was something in her voice then. Not quite bitterness. But close to it. The elder said I created friction. That I made the group uncomfortable. That I thought too loudly. She was quiet for a moment. He was not wrong that I made them uncomfortable. But I was not wrong about the things I said. Finn looked at her carefully. What did he do? He brought me to the transit hub on the 4th ring and told the staff I had become separated from my group. She said it plainly, the way she said everything. But the plainness of it made it worse somehow. He did not look back when he left. The room was quiet. Finn sat with that for a moment. He thought about the holding bay. 22 days. The yellowed notice on the glass. The way she had sat perfectly still while everyone walked past. The way she had pressed her paw to the glass and said those 4 words not as a cry for help but as a simple statement of something she had accepted as true. No one wants me. He looked at her sitting on the edge of the table, small and gray and completely composed, telling him the worst thing that had ever happened to her in the same voice she used to describe a misaligned relay. They were wrong, he said. She looked at him. The elder. Your group. All of them. Finn kept his voice steady. You are direct and you see things clearly and you say what is true even when it is uncomfortable. That is not a problem. That is exactly what you are supposed to be. He paused. It is also, for what it is worth, exactly what a maintenance engineer on a busy station needs more than almost anything else. Nix did not move. She sat on the edge of the table and looked at him with her amber eyes and said nothing. The station hummed quietly around them. Somewhere far below, a ship was docking. The lights outside the window shifted slightly. Finn had meant every word. He had not said it to be kind. He had said it because it was true, and he thought she of all people would know the difference. She went very still in the way she sometimes did when she was processing something important. Then, quietly, she said, no one has said that before. I know, Finn said simply. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she stepped down from the table, walked to the window, and sat in her usual spot. She did not say anything more that night. But she did not look away from him for a long time. The alarm came at the 2nd hour of the night. Finn was asleep when his handheld lit up the room. He was on his feet before he was fully awake, the way years of emergency shifts had trained him to be. The screen showed 3 words in red across the top, critical grid failure, and below that, a cascade of alerts spreading across the station map like a slow fire. He pulled on his jacket and grabbed his bag. Nyx was already at the door. He did not ask how she had known. He just opened the door and they both went through it. The corridors were beginning to fill with confused residents. The lights were flickering on the lower floors, shifting between full brightness and a dim emergency amber that made everything look wrong. Finn moved fast, cutting through side passages he knew from 3 years of maintenance work. Nyx kept pace beside him without effort, her small gray shape moving silently at his left side. The main grid control room was on level 3. When Finn got there, 2 other engineers were already at the panels, both of them talking over each other and neither of them looking confident. The station supervisor, a broad man named Ged, stood in the middle of the room with a handheld in each hand and the expression of someone who had run out of good options. He looked up when Finn came in. "It started in Junction Block 4, Ged said immediately. "Spread to the secondary distribution line. Now it is pulling load from the residential grid and we cannot stop the draw." Finn dropped his bag and moved to the nearest panel. The map on the screen was not good. 7 junction points were already showing red. 4 more were showing amber, which meant they were close. If the amber ones went red, the residential grid would begin failing floor by floor, and after that the life support buffers would start to compensate, and that was the point where a bad night became a very serious emergency. "What have you isolated so far?" Finn asked. "Nothing," the second engineer said. "Every time we isolate one line, the load jumps somewhere else." Finn looked at the map. He started running through the logic of it, where the power was going, why it was spreading, which junction to close first. The problem was that the cascade was moving faster than the diagnostic could track it. By the time the system flagged a fault, the load had already shifted again. He felt Nyx step up beside him. She looked at the screen for approximately 4 seconds. "Junction 9, she said. "Close it now. The load will try to reroute through 11 when you do. Close 11 before it gets there. You have about 40 seconds. Finn did not hesitate. He reached for the Junction 9 control and closed it. Then he moved his hand to 11 and waited, eyes on the flow indicators. The load shifted. It moved exactly where Nyx said it would move. He closed 11 before it arrived. The cascade slowed. The room went quiet for a moment. "How did," the second engineer started. "Keep watching the map," Finn said. He looked at Nyx. "What else?" Her eyes moved across the screen in that steady, unhurried way they always did. "The origin fault is still open in Block 4. Closing the junctions slowed the spread but did not stop it. The Block 4 relay panel is drawing more than it should and sending the overflow into the main line. Someone needs to go there and manually reset the primary breaker." "Where in Block 4? Finn asked. "Panel 7. Lower access. The breaker is the 3rd from the left. It will be warm to the touch." Finn grabbed his bag and looked at Ged. "Hold the junctions. Do not open anything until I get back." Ged nodded once. Finn ran. Nyx ran with him. Block 4 was 2 levels down and at the far end of the maintenance corridor. The lights there were fully amber now, flickering every few seconds. The air had the particular smell of overworked electrical systems, warm and slightly sharp. Finn found the lower access panel, pulled it open, and dropped to his knees in front of panel 7. He found the breakers. He ran his hand across them. 3rd from the left was hot. He looked at it. It had not tripped. It had stuck, held in a closed position by what felt like a warped casing, probably from the heat buildup. It was still passing current when it should have cut out 20 minutes ago. Everything that had gone wrong tonight had started here. He reached into his bag for the insulated reset tool. "Be careful with the casing," Nyx said from beside him. "If it is warped on the left side, the tool may slip." Finn adjusted his grip, angled slightly right and pressed the reset. There was a hard click. The breaker released. Above them, the lights in the corridor shifted from amber back to full white. Finn heard the ventilation system change pitch, the sound of a station returning to normal. He stayed on his knees for a moment with his hands still on the panel, breathing. Then he sat back and looked at Nyx. She was sitting on the floor beside him, completely calm, as if they had just finished a routine check and not pulled a failing station back from the edge of a serious emergency. Her amber eyes looked at him with the same steady, even expression they always had. "Good," she said simply. Finn almost laughed. They walked back through corridors that were already quieting down. Residents were returning to their quarters. The other engineers were running confirmation checks. Ged stopped Finn at the door of the control room and said, with genuine feeling, "Good work." He looked at Nyx for a moment, uncertain how to address her, and then said, "Both of you." Nyx accepted this with a small, single nod. They went back upstairs. Finn's quarters felt very quiet after all of it. He dropped his bag near the door and sat down in the chair. His hands were still carrying the tension of the last hour, that tight, focused feeling that took time to leave. He looked at the ceiling and let himself breathe slowly. Nyx jumped onto the table and sat there for a moment. Then she did something she had not done before. She stepped down from the table and walked to the chair and sat on the floor directly beside it, close enough that her side was almost touching his leg. Finn looked down at her. She was looking straight ahead. Not at him. Just forward, into the quiet room. "I used to think," she said, after a moment, "that no one would ever want me because I see too clearly. That the seeing was the problem." Finn did not say anything. He waited. "I told the elder once that the supply route the group was using would fail in 2 seasons. He told me I was creating fear with no cause." She paused. "The route failed in 2 seasons. Did he admit he was wrong?" Finn asked. "No," she said simply. "He said I had made everyone anxious for nothing." Finn was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "That is why I wanted you, Nyx. Not in spite of it. Because of it. The seeing is not the problem. It never was." She went still the way she did when something landed differently than she expected. Finn looked down at her small gray shape beside his chair, steady and quiet in the low light of the room, and thought about a holding bay and a yellowed notice and a paw pressed against glass. She had been saying the wrong thing to the wrong people her whole life. The things she said were true. The people were simply not ready to hear them. He had been ready. Nyx did not respond. She did not turn to look at him. She said nothing at all. But she moved a little closer. Just slightly. Just enough. Finn leaned back in the chair and looked at the window where the station lights were steady and calm outside. Neither of them spoke again that night. There was nothing left that needed saying. 2 beings who had both been left behind by the worlds they came from, sitting in a small room on floor 9, and neither one of them feeling that way anymore.